Good.
Equal scales with the super chat. Shalom, Rabbi. Paul claimed he was a Pharisee, student of Gamaliel. Is there
Yes.
proof? Heard there's a student list by Gamaliel. Is Paul on it?
Okay. This is like a really, whoever you are, you're smart. So that's a really good question. So as it turns out, Paul never claims to be a student of Gamaliel. If Paul claimed to be a student of Gamaliel, he would have been laughed out of town. Gamaliel lived at the time of Paul. He lived in the first half of the first century, and he was Einstein. He was just the giant. And in fact, the Christian Bible is, he's the only non-Christian Jew who's spoken of in a very flattering way. Now, Paul doesn't make the claim because he can't make the claim, because that's how well known. This is the person who's the head of the Sanhedrin. If you were a student of his, it's like you're a student of Teller. I mean, that would be insane. That claim is made by the or whoever wrote the book of Acts. Because by the time the book of Acts is written, so conservatively, the book of Acts is written, I don't know, 85, 90. I mean, somewhere that's very conservative. I mean, there are many people who believe Acts is a second century iteration, but we're just staying. So by the time Acts is written, let's just be very conservative and say 85. That means the book of Acts is written 3 decades after Paul's letters. People are dead. I mean, there's no way to look. So the Acts makes that claim, and the reason why the book of Acts speaks of Gamaliel in very flattering terms is because they're saying that Paul was a student of his. So if Gamaliel is a no good guy, so that what is it? How does that reflect on Paul? Now, what's very striking about Acts 5 as an example is that Gamaliel. See, this is where there's the shlemiel and the shlemazel in Jewish thinking. The shlemiel is the guy who drops the banana peel, and the shlemazel is the person who trips over it. So there's kind of a lot of that going on where the New Testament trips over itself. In the story of Gamaliel, Gamaliel says that Christians like Peter shouldn't be persecuted because if what they believe is not of God, it'll fall of its own. And Peter's iteration of Christianity did fall. The Torah observant Christianity didn't stick around. So Paul is going to always, at all times, going to insist that he's a Pharisee. That case he must make. He makes that most famous sources for that is, let's all pick his letters that are indisputed. Philippians chapter 3, Galatians 1 and 2. And why is Paul doing this? Why is he saying that he was more zealous than any of his peers? Why is he doing this? Because he's got opponents all over the place. He has enemies on all sides who were saying exactly that Paul's fake. He's a phony. What he's teaching is ungodly. So Paul has to explain, for instance, to the churches in Asia Minor, his letter to the churches in the letter to the Galatians as an example. He spends 2 chapters explaining why Peter's a crook, and he told it to Peter to his face in Galatians 1. I think it's verse 11. I think. So he's constantly explaining why everyone else is inferior to him, and that he is and therefore follow what I'm saying, you foolish Galatians 3 verse 1. So that's why Paul is constantly pushing for that he's a Pharisee. Now, the word Pharisee is an anachronism. It just means an Orthodox Jew. So if you know what Orthodox Jews are, so that's the gold standard in the entire Christian Bible, the Pharisees. Unless your righteousness exceeds the Pharisees and the scribes, the Sermon on the Mount. It's like not the Sadducees, the Pharisees. They're the ones who get it directly from Moses, Matthew 23, 1 and 2. So Paul is going to make this claim because people are considering him to be a fake and a phony, and that comes off in Acts. And I know some of you may be wondering, well, why am I using the Christian Bible to prove things when I don't believe that the Christian Bible is reliable? It's true. But there is one standard that all scholars will concede you can take to the bank on historicity, and that's the criteria of embarrassment. There would be no reason in the world why Paul's vicious conflicts with fellow Christians would ever be inserted in the book of Acts or in Paul's letters. It doesn't make sense. Not just fellow Christians. We talked about the Epistle of Barnabas, which is a pseudepigrapha, but the actual Barnabas was Paul's buddy. In fact, Barnabas is the guy that got Paul the connection to the Jerusalem church. Right? And his cousin is John Mark, and Paul has a fight with both of them. How likely is that someone would have invented that? No, that's very embarrassing. So Paul can't get along with anyone. We've met people like this who can't get along with people. That's Paul. Paul is not the guy you want to have dinner with. So Paul constantly has to display for all to see his credentials to show why his Christology is correct and his opponents are wrong. And Paul wins for the reason I explained earlier.
Thank you. We have quite a few here, Rabbi. So I don't know how brief you're able to be on some of them, but just keep that in mind as